Hello everyone, I'm Siddharthan. This is the 15th topic in our complete Python course where we will be discussing about immutable and mutable data types. So the previous sections was about the different data types such as integers, floating points, strings, list, tuple, set and dictionary. So some of these data types are immutable and some of these data types are mutable. So in this video, let's try to understand what is meant by this mutability and immutability and how this kind of changes the way that a data type kind of works. So this will be the agenda for today's video and let's get started. So for programming, we'll be using Jupyter notebooks, and here I've just mentioned some definitions on like about immutability and mutability. So in Python, data types can be classified into two categories: immutable and mutable. And the main difference between them is whether an object can be changed after it is created. So that's what it means. So we have several data types, right? And some data types can be changed once it has been created. So those data types are called as mutable. So the ones that are changeable are called as mutable, and the ones that cannot be changed are called as immutable. So immutable objects, so these objects cannot be modified after creation. You can also think about this as data types instead of objects. So these objects cannot be modified after creation. Examples: integers, floats, strings and tuples. So these data types cannot be changed, whereas the mutable objects such as list, dictionaries and sets, these can be modified after creation. So in these data types, right, list, dictionaries and sets, so once we have created these data types, we can edit values, add values and even delete values. So that's the main difference between them. So now let's try to understand about each of these things individually. So let's start with immutable data types. So I'll create a text cell and put this in bold. And now let's start with, let's say, integer. So here I mentioned that integers are immutable, right? So let's see how that works. Let's say that we have a variable called as x, and then we are assigning the integer value 10 to this variable. Now I'm going to say y is equal to, even you can maybe print the type of x if you want, right? And after that I can say y is equal to x plus 5, and then print both x and y. So here we are adding the value 5 to this x value, right? So x is 10 and we are adding value 5 to this, and this is getting stored in y. So when I run this, we print that x is an integer data type, so it belongs to the class int, and x value is 10 and y value is 15. So when I add the value 5 to this is not changing the value of x, but rather it's adding value 5 to this x value and storing it in y, but the original integer value of 10 that's stored in this x is kind of not changed. So that's the main difference. When you say x plus 5, it's not editing the original data that has been created and that's stored in the variable x. So this is like one way of like looking at this immutability. And let's say that we have the value as 5, and now I say that x is equal to value 10, and when I print this value of x in both these cases, first we are printing this x value and then we are changing this value to 10, and then we are printing this. Let's understand. So first, both are like values represents the same variable name, that's x, but first we add the value 5 and then we add the value 10. But I said that you cannot change the values of integer, right? But there is a trick here. So when I say x is equal to 5, we are assigning a value 5 to this. And when I say x is equal to 10, I'm not editing this variable x. I'm creating a new variable with the same name as x and assigning a new value that is 10. So here we are not editing the value of x, but rather assigning a new value to this variable x. So that's the difference. So a variable, if it's an integer, it cannot be edited or changed, but it can be reassigned to a new value. So we cannot say that this is mutable, as we are not changing any values but just like reassigning some other values to this. So that's like the main difference between them. So this is similar to saying x plus equal to let's say x is equal to 10, and then x plus e equal to another 10, or maybe I'll put this as 5. So this we have seen in the assignment operators in our previous videos. This is same as saying x is equal to x plus 5, right? So this means like to this value of x that is 10, and I'm adding the value 5 to this, and then I'm printing this. So this is like the same concept. So here first we add the value of 10, and then to this x I'm adding 5 and I'm assigning this to a new variable with the same name makes. Again, this doesn't count as editing, but this is like reassigning a value to this variable x. So this is about integers. You can reassign value to the variables that you have created, but you cannot edit the original value that has been created. So this is like similar to floating points and strings as well. So let's say that we have a float value. Let's say that this is for float. Again, float is also a immutable data type. So that means like you cannot change the value. If I say a is equal to 2.6 and let's say b is equal to a into, let's say, 10. So we are multiplying this a with 10, but this is not going to change the original value of a, but this will just multiply this and store this in the variable b, as you can see. So 2.6 is still 2.6. So we haven't like multiplied. So we have multiplied it, but we have not changed it, but we have stored it in this variable b, so we are getting this value. So this kind of uh, the same for a string as well. Let's say that I'm creating a string with the variable name text and just putting a string called as Python programming. So here also, if I check the type of this text, it's going to say it's a string str, which is a string data type. I can access the individual letters of this string by saying text of 0. That means index of 0, and we have discussed about index as well. So when I say text of 0, this is the 0th element, this is the first element, and so on. So p represents index 0, y represents index 1, t represents index 2, and so on. This goes on, right? So when I say print text of 0, it's going to print the first letter because that's the index 0. But I cannot change this index values. I cannot say that text of 0 is equal to, let's say I want this p to be changed with z. When I do this, it's going to throw me an error. Oh, I have to put this in double quotes. So I'm trying to change this value p to y in the first letter. So that's going to say string object does not support item assignment. So once a string has been created, you cannot edit that original string value as it is immutable. You can make some changes to this. Let's say that I have let's say this text as Python programming. I can create a new variable called as result, which is equal to text plus, I'm putting a space here and say Python programming language. So here I'm adding this string, another string called as language to this text, but the difference is I'm not adding this to the original variable that we have created. So here I'm printing the text and I'm printing the result as well. So that's going to say Python programming and Python programming language. So that's about it, right? So this is how you can work with this data types such as integers, floats, strings, even tuples, where you cannot edit the values. You can like reassign values to the same variable, but you cannot edit the original value that has been created. So similarly, in the case of tuple, which we have discussed in the last video, where we have discussed about list, tuple, set, and dictionary. So we know that we can create tuple with 1, 2, 3. That's basically values that are mentioned within the parenthesis, and you can print the type of this my tuple, and you can also print the tuple itself. That's going to say it belongs to the class tuple, and these are the values. You can print the individual values here by saying my tuple of 0. So that's going to print the first value, that is 1. So 1 belongs to index 0. This belongs to value belongs to the index 1. This is index 2, and so on, right? So when I say my tuple of 0, this is this value. But I cannot change this value. So I cannot say my tuple of 0 is equal to 10. So here I'm trying to change this value 1 with 10, and that's going to raise an error saying tuple object does not support item assignment. Whereas in the case of list, right, you can do this where if you have 5 elements or 10 elements, no matter like what is the number of elements that you have, you can change those values once the list has been created. So this original variable called, let's say that we have a variable called as my list. So the values will be edited in that original list. So that's how the mutable and immutable data types differ. So we have discussed about integers, floating points. The next one is about string, right? So I'll just put a comment here saying this is for string and this is for tuple. So now let's discuss about mutable uh, tuple. So mutable data types, that's nothing but list, dictionaries, and sets. Okay. So this is for mutable data types. So first let's discuss about list. So I'll put a comment and say this as list. and let's create a list by saying my list, which is equal to the same values 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then I can print the data type of this my list. So we know that that's going to say it's a list data type. And then I'm going to print my list as well. So it's going to say it belongs to the class list and the values are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? So now previously we tried to access like some values and try to change it, right? Let's do the same thing. So I'm going to access the 0th value, which is 1. So I'm going to say my list print my list of 0. So that's going to give the value 1. Now I'm going to say my list of 0. So this value should be changed with the value 100. And then I'm going to print this my list. So here we are not reassigning a new list to this variable called as my list, but we are editing the list that has been already created. So now this 1 has been replaced with this 100, but this cannot be done with a tuple, as we can say this as raised an error. So that's why we say that lists are mutable data types, and you can kind of append values to this. I can say my list dot append, let's say 35. So and then print this my list, right? So we have added a value 35 to this list that's existing, right? So similarly, I can also delete some values. Let's say that I say my list dot remove a number like let's say 3. So that's going to remove the value 3 from this list that we have over here. So I run this. Oh, sorry, it should be REMOVE. So now we don't see that 3 anymore. So this is how we can edit the values in a list. So you can append a new value, you can change a value that's already present. So here we have changed 1 to 100, and then how you can remove a particular value. So that's about this list. So now let's see how sets are mutable. So this is the second example in the mutable data type. So these are set. So I can say my set is a variable that I'm creating. We know that it should be present in curly brackets. I can say 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Similarly, 5 data points, and then we can print the type of my set. Let me copy this quickly, and let's print this my set as well. So it belongs to the class set, and we have the values as 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So now I can add a new value to this my set by saying my set dot add. Let's add the value 10 to this, and then print my set. So that's going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So it has added a new value, but these are not possible in the case of tuple, as we cannot edit the tuple values. You can try that out there as well if you want. So if you want to remove a particular value, you can simply say my set dot same thing, same function, remove. So it's going to remove that particular value. So this is how you can edit the values that's present in a set. And the third example in the case of mutable objects is my dictionary. Right, so we have seen how we can create dictionaries. So let's say that we are creating, maybe I'll just use a small variable name like a. So we are creating a dictionary called as a, and it has like key value pairs like name, let's say Alice, and second key value pair is age, which is let's say 30. Okay, so now I'm going to add a new key value pair to this. I can also print this a and also print the data type of a. That's going to say dictionary is like name Alice age 30, and it belongs to the class dictionary. So we know that it's an immutable data type, so we can change it. So in this original dictionary a, I'm going to add another key value pair. So for that I can say a square bracket create a new key value pair. Let's put city, and within the city I'm going to create the value as New York. So what we are doing here is, so similar to name and age, which represents the keys of this dictionary, I'm creating a new key called a city. To that, just like Alice and 30, I'm adding a new value, a string called as New York. And after that I can print this a. So that's going to add this. So this is how you can edit a dictionary that has been already created. So again, here we are not creating any new copies of this dictionary, but just like editing the dictionary that is already there. And if you want to edit a specific value, right, so let's say that I want to change this value 30 to something else, 40 or something, I can mention the key name, which is age here. So I can say a, within double quotes mention your key name, which is age in this case, and they can change this to 40, and then print your age. So that's going to change his age value, that is 30 to 40. So you can also delete a value by saying let's say delete a of age. So that's going to delete the key value pair, that is age, and I'll print this A. So that's going to say name and city. So we have deleted this age. So this is how you can edit a dictionary. So this is the main difference between immutable and mutable data types. And there may be cases where you want to use a data type that where you shouldn't change that data type later. In that case, you can go with immutable data types, like let's say tuple. But in some cases you want the data type to be changed, or you create that data type dynamically. In that case, if you want a sequence data type, you can go with a list or even maybe a set, right? And even dictionaries, we try to create those dynamically. List and dictionaries are kind of created dynamically in most cases. So this mutable data types come in handy in those cases. So this is about these two differences, where immutable objects or the immutable data types cannot be changed once it has been created. And the examples are integers, floats, strings, and tuples. And we have seen that example of how you cannot edit those values. You can create new variable with that same name, but still you cannot like edit the original values that you have given it. And mutable objects are the one where the original data can be modified in the same variable, right? For example, the case of list, set, and dictionary. So I hope that you have understood what we have discussed today. So this is like a very basic stuff. Like it's not something that you explicitly use, but it's good to know about this. So I hope you have understood whatever we have covered, and that is all from my side for this video. I'll see you in the next upload. Thanks for watching.